Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them is the controversial prequel franchise to the Potter series. However, it has both fans and haters. If the first film was more favorably received by Potter fans, then the second one infuriated many. It's all about plot holes and inconsistencies with the canon that J.K. Rowling has defended so much all these years and which she herself destroyed. In anticipation of the release of the new part of the franchise, our About Movies crew decided to recall all the logical inconsistencies, blunders, and plot holes in Fantastic Beasts: The Crimes of Grindelwald. In this video, we'll point out the details that were missed by the creators and which you might not notice when watching. And before we move closer to Newt Scamander, of course, we want you to click on the magic subscribe button and bell to find out all the most interesting and non-obvious facts about your favorite films. Subscribe and let's get started. To transport the most dangerous criminal for thousands of kilometers, it's best to choose a time of storm with thunder and lightning. In calmer weather, flying is not interesting. Why is almost nothing visible on the screen? What's wrong with color correction? Here's another confirmation that although magic wands are needed for the spell, you can do without it, if you really want to. Grindelwald's bestie either sits under his chair or disappears somewhere. And what's the point of keeping him close to the owner even if he's wearing a muzzle? So that he would not be so lonely in the cell? Here's a cliche: if someone is sitting in a dark cell, the light will definitely fall directly on his eyes. By the way, strips of light cannot fall like that because the holes in the floor are covered with the heads of those who look into them, which means the light doesn't pass through them completely. There is no such rainy night when the brightest moonlight wouldn't fall into the buildings. On the glass of a frantically rushing carriage, drops to the sides under the pressure of the wind should spread and not flow down, as if the carriage is standing still. The Aurors who are flying behind the carriage clearly have vision problems. How could they miss Abernathy teleporting right in front of them? A logical question. Why was Grindelwald not neutralized during this journey? It's obvious that he'll try to use the chance to escape. What if they would freeze him for the entire flight? Only freshmen could do it in a second. It seems that the escorts for the most dangerous criminal in the entire magical world were simply picked up from the street. Why do they not fight back but obediently take blows? Abernathy doesn't bite Spielman but only pretends to do it. It was really necessary to draw drops on non-existent lenses. It was the sound of the glass of an empty carriage and certainly not filled with water. And how can those tassels on the curtains hang dry when they've just been wet? When Grindelwald pulled out the door, everyone inside should have flown out with the water, and not just two nameless Aurors who were no longer needed for the plot. It doesn't seem that Abernathy and Spielman are fastened to their seats. We even don't mention the lizard. A second ago, except for Newt and Lita, there was only a sweeper in the corridor, but in the next frame, some woman condensed from the air in front of her. Magic. It turns out that owls in the wizarding world can poop to the side at a 45-degree angle, and if a rag cleans everything perfectly by itself, then why is there an elf here? We track down and kill the dangerous Obscurus, right? Cool, let's take this case to Newt Scamander. Who's better suited for the role of a hired killer if not the kindest pacifist zoologist who just last year brilliantly proved his unreliability by arranging a grandiose mess abroad? What's wrong with Grindelwald's eye? He was normal when we saw him in Harry Potter. Having killed a family of muggles to occupy their apartment, the villain apparently robbed all their relatives and friends in the same way.
We've won elfly cities in their millions.
Well, we've got here again a pale guy who wants wizards to rule over muggles with a fanatical ally who has nothing against infanticide and is gathering a group of henchmen with the aim of a global coup. Doesn't it remind you of anything? How could Grindelwald's henchmen leave this child in the apartment? Shouldn't they have cleared the entire living space of muggles before letting their boss in? Whatever one may say, 3 coffins were supposed to be loaded into the hearse. The teddy bear jumps into different spots on the floor time and again. When Newt blows off the Ministry agent, you can see him hanging in the air on invisible cables. Newt sits either exactly opposite the interlocutor or obliquely, and Dumbledore's hat does nothing but flattens and straightens again depending on the current angle. On the view from the outside of the bus, the light is not on, but on the view from the inside, it's quite the opposite situation. How did Newt know where Dumbledore had transgressed to when he was transported to exactly the same place after him? All he saw was how he disappeared, jumping out of the bus. And if wizards sense where the person in front of them has transgressed, then how could this spy of heroes lose?
I cannot move against Grindelwald. It has to be you.
That's right, and Newt should also challenge the most dangerous bandit, Magical Rambo, and nothing more. What is the point of keeping nifflers behind the door between the bars of which they can roam outside without touching? Of course they can leave this place every day.
You were supposed to have been obliviated.
It didn't work, pal. The potion only erases bad memories. I didn't have any.
And here's another absurd plot hole. Firstly, in the previous film, it was quite obvious the spell worked perfectly. And secondly, if Oblivion only erases bad memories, then there is no point in it at all, since people will still remember magical intervention according to this logic. At 20 minutes to 9, just a couple of minutes later, the clock arrow jumped a quarter of an hour ahead, and so it stuck to this place tightly.
Newt Scamander with fiancée Lita Lestrange.
Well, how stupid do you have to be to confuse a completely different zoologist and famous war hero? The journalist and editor who sent this to print would have to be drunk as hell to come out with this. And why didn't Newt ask for a retraction if he is in love with Tina and knows perfectly well what impression such a publication will make on her? In the world of wizards, this can certainly be fixed with one spell. Wizards are so worried about not being seen by muggles, so they teleport in front of everyone right after shouting in the middle of an empty street.
Queenie!
In London, the rain not only has a habit of turning on like a light bulb, but also does it at the most appropriate moment for the plot. What kind of postcard is Newt now restoring? Was there a scene in the film about how Queenie tore it to shreds and scattered it to the floor for some unknown reason? As we understand, all muggles also don't see point-blank manipulations of the revived statue. Kama's feather, which is essential to the plot, has a life of its own. Now it sticks out on the hat. In a minute, it disappears from there, although Kama will drop it only on the street. Nagini has a unique dress that evaporates somewhere during the transformation into a snake and returns during the opposite transformation. Bruce Banner would definitely check it out. It is rather strange that Newt trudged for several kilometers with Jacob on this cliff and during all this time didn't say a word to him about the method by which he was going to get to Paris. I illegally left for another country. I could be sent to Azkaban for this, so I used the spell in broad daylight in front of as many muggles as possible right at the crossroads. And of course, it was at this very place that Kama met Tina and even dropped the feather from his hat. There is no need to go anywhere. Everything happened on this patch. Accio continues to be applied to living things to which it cannot be applied. And since it can be applied to them, why didn't Newt catch the escaped nifflers like that at his house and instead was engaged in juggling? These disappearances in the middle of the square, muggles apparently don't notice at close range either.
A mistake. See, I know she's in Paris. She sent me a postcard. I can show it to you here. Maybe you can help me find it.
So Queenie thinks she still has the card. Then who ripped it up and scattered it around Newt's apartment? Nothing is clear. That's right, Abernathy. Having made his way into the camp of the enemy, the spy must remove his disguise as quickly as possible. Another effortless transition from sunny dry weather to heavy rain within 10 seconds. They really think it's okay. Why is Kama walking around so dirty? Is he a bum who spends the night in his coat in all the Parisian ditches? If only he could dust himself off when meeting strangers.
I saw someone like this last night. Perhaps if I showed you where, if you wouldn't mind, that would be...
How do you know that he won't lead you to the place where you found this feather? Hey, Tina, you could have warned the heroes to be afraid of Kama and not stand and wait until he takes Newt's wand away. And how did he, who was never a strong magician and even sick with parasites, disarm Tina himself and imprisoned her without any problems? Actually, she's an Auror. The pen continues its travels. First, it returned to Kama's hat, and when he brought the heroes to Tina, it disappeared from there again. Another one cliché. All monsters love to roar in an epic pose. No one but Dumbledore can transgress to Hogwarts, but the guys from the Ministry somehow don't know that. Did Dumbledore teach defense against the dark arts or what? He specialized in transfiguration, didn't he?
Go with Professor McGonagall, please.
This is one of those plot holes that pissed off its fans the most. Remember that the action of the film takes place in 1927? The Harry Potter books mention that McGonagall only became a teacher in 1956, so what is she doing here in 1927?
Professor McGonagall, the stranger studies again!
So how old is this McGonagall? Is she immortal? It turns out that she was already working even when Lita studied here, that is, a full 10 years earlier. Most of all, in this situation, it's not even the factual error that confuses, but it's meaningless. Minerva is only briefly shown. She doesn't have any meaningful actions, and her appearance doesn't affect anything. It looks like the character was only introduced into the film for the sake of fan service. Cliché. The heroine looks into the mirror so that she sees not herself but a movie camera, and she's already standing formally in the next frame. Another plot hole. Didn't expect it? The mirror has always shown only innermost desires. Why can real memories be seen in it now? Was it confused with a pool of memory? Dumbledore should see his happy family without his dead mother and sister and father in Azkaban. And what is this mysterious blood oath that was never mentioned in any of the films, and instead of which there was an unbreakable vow? Oh yeah, and wouldn't it be easier for friends to conclude it, so that they don't have to slash their hands and so that a vial doesn't appear there, with the help of which the oath can be destroyed? Moreover, how could the heroes make an oath that would not allow them to fight each other if in their youth they parted right after a duel during which Dumbledore's sister died? If the non-aggression spell had already been cast at that moment, then why didn't the young magicians die during the fight? So that's why Kama fainted. He caught a parasite of water dragons living in underground sewers. Well, then it's very lucky that he passed out exactly at the very moment when he brought Newt and Jacob to Tina. Otherwise, the plot would have not progressed. How could a terribly poisonous creature be given into the hands of an incompetent person? Doesn't Newt really care what will happen if Jacob misses the abomination or lets it crawl into his own eye?
Mr. Scamander, I need to go talk to the ministry.
Transgress, why are you going on foot? These digital machines are hanging over the pavement so suspiciously. So that's who Dumbledore's old friend was and whose apartment Newt settled in Paris. And where was he all this time up to this moment, shyly hiding in the closet? And why didn't Dumbledore tell Newt whose apartment it was back in London? Did he decide to surprise him? As soon as a statue of a raven appeared in the hall, it turned out that the alchemist, quite by chance, knows exactly where this place is located.
I'm sorry. I gotta go to the cemetery.
Then why did you tell him a half a minute ago where to go? You could have just said, I don't know what kind of raven is there, and that's all. Listen, Newt, you probably shouldn't have changed in front of the whole street. Well, at least you could have come around the corner. In the crowded Ministry of Magic, Newt's brother is incredibly convenient to pursue the heroes just where there is no one except for two pensioners who are in such insanity that they already deeply don't care about what is happening.
I think that might have been the best moment of my life.
But why? Newt's brother is shown as a positive and caring guy. At least it would be hinted that the relationship between them is so mysterious that for Newt there is no greater happiness than to see Theseus defeated and tied to a chair. Night cemeteries are densely dotted with searchlights. They are even attached to the ceiling in every crypt. The grandmother at the counter turned 180 degrees right between shots.
I'm happy for you.
No, well, please don't be happy.
Cliché. There is a misunderstanding between the characters because they cannot communicate normally with each other. And couldn't they have sorted things out anywhere except where they could have been grabbed at any moment? I mean, for example, in the alchemist's house where Newt spent hours rummaging through his suitcase? When a visitor calls one archival column instead of pushing it only to the center, the repository for some reason shuffles all its columns 10 times. And of course, Newt and Tina will accidentally jump on the one that Lita will call. Instead of rushing at once, the enemies prefer to approach slowly and with a menacing look.
These aren't cats. They're Matago. They're spirit familiars.
An interesting statement, especially after J.K. Rowling herself explicitly said that familiars don't exist in the Harry Potter universe. The scene where the characters climb down from the pole to the floor was forgotten to be pasted into the film during editing. It's very interesting how this monster moved into the real world and at the same time into the cemetery. If Kama has the task of killing Corvus Lestrange, he will take up this only after he lays out his entire backstory to him in detail and waits for him to be saved at the very last moment. So it turns out that Lita replaced her brother with an unfamiliar baby a second before the ship sank? It remains only to be slightly surprised how it was on the ship, right in the cabin opposite that a child of identical age was accidentally discovered, and also a boy, and even left unattended just at the moment when Lita's nanny also left somewhere and even in identical diapers and a cap. And it's absolutely wonderful that this random child is not only a magician by pure coincidence, but also the future obscurus of incredible power, so someone's fantasy has suffered. Yeah, and in 1901, not a single passenger liner sank on the way from Europe to America. Oh, look, some magical metamorphosis constantly occurs with Grindelwald's mustache. They either fit on the upper lip, then sharply shorten, then immediately grow back. And what? The name of the spell is no longer necessary to pronounce? And why the hell did the Auror kill this girl right off the bat instead of simply disarming her? These professionals can't even fight the flame of Grindelwald, although the same Newt does it without any problems. Until now, wizards have been transgressing in a whirlwind, remaining in place, but now for some reason they are doing it in the form of rockets taking off.
He's the answer. He wants what we want.
He literally had just said the wizards needed muggles as servants. When did he say that both races would be equal and could marry whenever they wanted? Yes, you should be the first to fight him to the death since you love Jacob so madly. Once again, a blatant plot oddity. How could Flamel show up at the cemetery just now? He saw the future in the orb even before the Aurors came to the meeting. Why didn't he immediately transport himself here and warn of the danger? What was he doing all this time? Decided to be sure to get on foot? How, after all this fiery hell, this clumsy niffle remained alive? It's completely incomprehensible, and this one, you see, only limps slightly on one paw. He also managed to steal a vial with a blood oath from the main villain, although not only was a bunch of people looking at him at that moment, but he himself could hardly fail to notice how a carcass the size of a small cat was crawling on it. And why did Grindelwald carry a bottle with him at all? Shouldn't he have hidden it somewhere so that someone wouldn't steal it and doom him in the future to be defeated in a fight with the only one who can defeat him? In the books, we were clearly told that Dumbledore's mother died in 1899, and his father was imprisoned in Azkaban even earlier and died there. The events of the Crimes of Grindelwald take place in 1927, which means that Credence must be at least 28. In the film, he looks much younger. He is a young man, almost a teenager. There is no way he could be Albus's brother. But even assuming that this is the case, it's not clear how and why he got on the ship that we were shown in the film. Was he sent there right after Kendra died? Who is the woman who is with the child? There are no answers to these questions yet, and it is unclear whether they will be convincing enough in the next films. And with Phoenix, it turns out strange. If he is Dumbledore in a moment of despair, why then has he never appeared to Credence before, although he had more than enough suitable minutes? And the fact that the Phoenix still arose is still no guarantee that Credence is Dumbledore's brother. In the Harry Potter films, these creatures were not only representatives to the Dumbledore family. For example, Fawkes flew to the aid of Harry Potter in the Chamber of Secrets. And how could he go from an infant state immediately into an adult? In general, let's hope that Gellert is lying. Otherwise, the plot of the next film will be hopelessly damaged. Unfortunately, the story that was conceived as a trilogy was decided to greedily pull for 5 films, stuffing the series with unnecessary storylines and characters, and cutting them off in mid-sentence. But what really pleases us is the scenery of the films, which turned out to be very atmospheric. This is not surprising because the production designer for both parts was Stuart Craig, who worked on all the Harry Potter films. And if you click on this icon, you'll find out how the magical world of Harry Potter was created on the screen. We talked about how the scenery for the film was created, about the funny moments that happened to the actors on the set, and much more. Follow the link and watch. And that's all for today. This was About Movies. Like this video and see you soon. Bye.